Men have been playing with balls and sticks for a very long time. They've also been playing golf since about here, but it was unorganized, and the rulers didn't like it, so they organized and then got banned. In come rich white people to create rules, and golf, the gentleman's game, began. "Let's set up a professional season," said no one, who continued to play random opens for only gentlemen amateurs for another 100 years before the professionals took over and set up the PGA Tour. Leave it to the Americans to monetize and unionize, as prestigious golf tournaments from around the country banded together to offer the most elite competition, exciting matches, and money as well. While men like Harry Vardon publicized professional golf in England, Walter Hagen brought the real excitement and money across the pond. The gentleman's game was now ruled by working class men like Gene Sarazen, who grew up working at courses, becoming the best there and teaching people how to play. Doing so took them out of contention for amateur events, the biggest tournaments at the time except for Opens. But thanks to the PGA and their tour, or circuit at the time, more and more tournaments for pros popped up around the country, and golf was beginning to be ruled by professionals. Pretty much every area in the US wanted to get in on the financial action the new money-filled sport introduced. So state opens popped up all over the map, hoping to display the best golfers in the country to as many fans as possible and line their pockets the American way, by underpaying their athletes. But players still came from all over to win, get some money, but more importantly, some exposure so they could grow their teaching business, because outside of relatively small purses, that's the only way they could earn money at the time. There were majors, but nothing like today, and the pros couldn't even technically compete in all four of them at the time to win a Grand Slam like Bobby Jones did, the legendary amateur, in 1930, because two of the biggest tournaments were still amateur events, and the PGA Tour was really just the circuit for these men. But slowly, golf grew. The Masters popped up as an invite-only pro and amateur event, and the way of the amateur slowly disappeared, or at least took a back seat to pro golf. The stupid stickball game that was scored the exact opposite of pretty much every game ever created was now cool-ish, but the money for most was average-ish. Ben Hogan, one of the most legendary early pros, went broke several times chasing the tour. Unless you won, you could not make a living, which he ended up doing, winning 63 professional tournaments between 1938 and 1959, while also serving in World War II as an Air Force pilot, but it wasn't anywhere near lucrative yet. However, that doesn't mean the sport wasn't rich in other things, namely morale boosting. World War II was terrible for everyone, but all over the world, golf persisted. Just check out these rules from a club in London in 1941. Rule number 1, players are asked to collect the bomb and shrapnel splinters to save these from causing damage to the mowing machines. And get this, rule number 7, a player whose stroke is affected by the simultaneous explosion of a bomb may play another ball. Penalty 1 stroke. There are even reports of American POWs in Germany in 1942 playing golf with boot rubber and rudimentary clubs, as German soldiers allowed them to build simple holes inside the walls of the camp. But the fact is, at home, most of the PGA-run tournaments ceased during the war, except primarily one, the 1944 PGA Championship. At the time, PGA tournament manager Fred Corcoran noticed British citizens rushing to St. Andrews to get their round in the moment an air raid had finished. He realized golf could raise spirits in the UK. Clearly, there was something to it if they risked their lives to play, so he said, let's give it a try in the US, despite many pro golfers being away on military duty, primarily Sam Snead. Byron Nelson, who had a rare blood disorder that caused his blood to clot 4 times slower than normal, led the entire tournament until a completely unknown character before and after the match stole it away from him in the last moment. To be fair, it was allegedly in thanks to some classy, unsportsmanlike conduct that really got those record crowds going. Bob was coughing and sneezing whenever Byron Nelson lined up to make a putt. We don't really know why it happened, but we do know that Bob had been drafted and was to report for duty just a week after the round, and probably needed the $3,500 you got from first place, $60,000 today, to help his family while he was away. He had nothing to lose. Sorry, Byron Nelson. Tough. Guess you'll just have to win the next one. But the crazy turnout at this championship proved to the PGA Tour that the boys at home could still rally the country behind this silly sport and give people something to be excited about and distract them from their work during the week and the terrible war news that would come on the weekend. The PGA Tour showed that golf was more than just a game and quickly catapulted it to one of the most popular sports in the country after the war. But the money wasn't lucrative for most. That is, until the 1960s. Yeah, a lot happened in the 1960s, but for golfers, the money was really heating up. In 1968, Bob Golby, 11-time PGA Tour winner, including that year's Masters, became the first golfer to accept a sponsorship when he put an appliance manufacturer's logo on his hat for $50 a week and health insurance. At the time, this probably seemed silly to a lot of people, and I'm sure some pretentious golf fans thought of it as a desperate shill for money, just as the so-called gentlemen amateurs had looked down upon the professionals 70 years earlier. But these silly contracts and advertisements gave the game of golf the ability to boom in popularity. Sponsorships changed the dynamic of golf for so many, making the career viable for not only the 10 or 15 best players, but also those that were fighting to get to the top but were just not there yet. So with the increased accessibility of the game came more talent. And perhaps one of the greatest duels the PGA Tour has and ever will see. Jack Nicklaus versus Arnold Palmer. Arnold was charismatic and is probably the biggest reason golf became as televised as it was during the 1960s. He was handsome, from a reasonable background, not that big money gentleman crap we had seen before, and was one of the main reasons the British Open, now the Open Championship, became such a staple and a major on the PGA Tour. Before him, Ben Hogan had won it already, but few made the journey over there to compete due to travel requirements and relatively small purses. They wanted the American money, baby, and again, without sponsorships just yet, they really couldn't afford to do it. However, with Palmer going abroad and then eventually winning the Open Championship in 61 and 62, well, European golf fans were turned on to the American golf world, and the PGA Tour became worldwide, with Arnold Palmer seemingly like its king. That is, until 22-year-old Jack Nicklaus stole the 1962 US Open away from him in an 18-hole Sunday playoff. That was not any normal loss, because with it went Palmer's chances to match Ben Hogan with his own triple crown, having already won the Masters and going on to win the Open Championship a month later, which would have cemented Palmer as achieving something few golfers ever had and something Jack Nicklaus would never do. But it was clear Jack would rule the golf world, and with it, the PGA Tour for the next few decades. Prior to the 1962 US Open, Nicklaus had been the best amateur in the country, but now he was ready to take the best pro title from Arnie, and with that, a lot of money as well. With these two dueling at the top of golf alongside the likes of Gary Player came expanded TV coverage, allowing the game to grow those sexy purses and bring in more fans than anyone could have ever imagined. These golfers didn't need to teach anymore to be considered professional, but rather the PGA Tour gave them the ability to become professional just from the money they could win at the tournaments and the sponsorships they wore at the tournaments. In just 50 years, the term professional golfer had completely evolved in definition, with now teaching pros and tour pros. But with more money came a lot more problems. The PGA Tour was now bringing in significantly more money than ever before, and tour pros wanted to take that money for themselves in larger purses. After all, they were the ones everyone wanted to see. But the association wanted to distribute all the money to fund growing the game at a local level, aka probably keeping the money for themselves. So the pros left and formed their own thing before eventually making up and crawling back to their toxic ex like nothing ever happened. But now the game was bigger than ever. African Americans were allowed to play after Charlie Sifford broke the race barrier in 1961, and the LPGA Tour was created in 1968. So the game was now ballooning to an unbelievable height, so high that the original gentleman probably would have passed out if you told them who regularly played golf nowadays. But in 1975, a child was born who would blow the entire PGA Tour and the game of golf completely out of the water. Now, lots of things did happen in golf from 1975 to 1990. Jack Nicklaus won his 18th major at 46 years old. Seve Ballesteros became world number 1. Jan Stephenson brought sex to the game of golf, opening up the door for Paige Spiranac. And the average driving distance went from 256 yards in 1980 to 262 yards in 1990. But then came Tiger Mania. This kid was being groomed to be the best golfer in the world from basically the point he could breathe. From being on the Mike Douglas show with his clubs at 2 years old to ruling junior golf in the country for the next decade, the kid had it and brought excitement to the game and eventually the PGA Tour that it had never seen. Not only was he elite, but there was something different about him. Jack Nicklaus had been a big prospect when he was going through the ranks as a young golfer, but Tiger, man, men were obsessed with this child in probably, almost certainly, actually, an unhealthy way. But I also get it. From his six-peat in the Junior Amateur and U.S. Amateur Championships to his Low-Am victory in the 1995 Masters at 19, he wasn't just a great golfer, but was one of those few human beings that excites people that don't give a shit about the game they are playing. So he brought unparalleled attention to the PGA Tour when he turned pro in 1996. There's only a few characters in the history of sports that are able to grow larger than the game itself. There's Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, and now Tiger Woods. The minute he went pro, he also signed a sponsor contract with Nike reportedly worth $40 million. That's quite the jump from the $50 air conditioning manufacturing sponsorship that started everything just about 30 years earlier. On top of all of that, more and more people came into the game that diverged from the traditional sportsman-like gentleman the game had presented for us for decades. John Daly made waves for his drinking escapades and wild antics with women that upset a lot of people, but was exciting to a lot more. He also led the tour in driving distance basically non-stop for 12 years. The game was continuing to evolve, and the type of person golfing continued to look more and more different than the game's founders could have ever imagined. Plus, now a brown skinny kid from Southern California named Tiger Woods ruled the tour. Interest in the PGA and golf as a whole peaked and troughed with the wins and losses of Tiger. Most people wanted to see him succeed. A lot of people hate-watched him, waiting for him to fall, but he was far and away the biggest golf spectacle the game had seen in a century. When Tiger wasn't playing, people didn't watch, but when he was and when he had his game on, spectators simply could not take their eyes off of him. From the largest margin of victory ever in a Masters in 1997, being perfect at Pebble in the 2000 US Open to help earn the Tiger Slam, to his consistent comebacks and revivals after making swing changes that most golfers never really understood the reasoning behind, he inspired kids for years, which would change the game today, but he wasn't perfect, and it definitely affected the tour. When Tiger slipped up and made big mistakes in his personal life, well, it wasn't personal for very long, and that inevitably looked poorly for the tour. But after all, Tiger was aging, and the PGA Tour was still around, so they continued kicking. However, without Tiger, for many, it really wouldn't be the same. If you listen to the start of almost all golfers today, they tell you about how Tiger inspired them this way or that way, but for a while, the PGA Tour didn't have anybody to really inspire kids. There would be a new wonder guy every few years that would pique the hopes of fans and probably the tour that he would fill the hole Tiger left, like Rory in 2013, Jordan Spieth in 2015, and Dustin Johnson in 2018, and so on. And maybe not so surprisingly, beautiful moments still happened. Fresh feuds sparked the interest of fans. Phil Mickelson became the oldest major winner in 2021, and pro golfers finally began taking advantage of social media to build their following and increase interest in the game overall. Not to mention Tiger's 2019 victory in the Masters. But also, golf influencers came along, who at one point probably did more to grow the game than the PGA Tour was doing. And amidst that weird struggle came the first competition basically in the tour's entire history.
The Live Golf Tour. Live Golf.
Live Golf.
Live Golfers. Live Golf is the game in full throttle.
In 2019, reports came out of a rival tour becoming public soon, so PGA Tour officials came out threatening to ban any golfer who joined. They clearly felt very much so threatened, and the sport that had been so comfortable, so exciting, but also so dated, was going to be moved by some real waves.
It's been an unfortunate week.
that was created by some unfortunate decisions, those decisions being players choosing to violate our tournament regulations.
In 2022, the race between LIV and the PGA Tour finally began for real, with the inaugural tournament being played at the Centurion Club, with many ex-PGA Tour faces in that field. Dustin Johnson was reportedly paid $150 million to join, and was far and away the biggest name on the board. Along with him came Louis Oosthuizen, Lee Westwood, Sergio Garcia, and many more, all likely being offered at least 8 figures to join. Money they probably never imagined they would see again in their career on the PGA Tour. With the public investment fund, these golfers had access to crazy money, and more golfers, including Bryson, Koepka, and even Phil Mickelson, joined the ranks chasing that money. Some came up with other excuses and said it had nothing to do with the money. Yeah, right. But a lot of PGA Tour golfers absolutely slammed them for betraying the tour, namely Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods. They argued that none of these golfers would be where they were without the tour, and so they were disrespecting what helped make them who they are. But eventually, the PGA Tour reversed their claims, and LIV golfers were allowed to play in certain events, namely the majors, if they could qualify. The tour would have lost so much excitement, as the field was significantly weaker without Jon Rahm, Brooks Koepka, Bryson Kemp-Smith, and more. The competition was so fierce before LIV on the tour, and it kept most people excited for most tournaments because these FedEx points mattered, and we all wanted to see which one of these 10 to 15 insanely talented golfers would actually come out on top. However, with so many great golfers going to LIV, the PGA Tour's events were diluted and filled with a lot of competitors that fans just didn't know. A lot of them were very talented, but golf fans, viewers, got behind events and golfers when they know the story of those golfers and they can create a narrative about the competition, like Bryson versus Brooks, Phil versus Tiger, or Jack versus Arnold. The PGA Tour doesn't have that in the same way it did for a long time, and now it's kind of the PGA Tour versus LIV Golf, and the next few years are going to be much different to what we've been so used to for so long. The future likely holds some sort of compromise between the two organizations, holding co-events so they can both share the stage and give fans what they want, the most competitive competition possible. But that means a likely less substantial position for the PGA Tour, one that it's been building for well over 100 years now. It's not the best note to end on, but that's basically where we are today. But if you enjoyed this story, check out my Patreon in the description below to help me out, as I can't necessarily monetize all these videos due to false copyright claims. But if you enjoyed this video, check out this other video all about the Tiger Slam, the greatest achievement in PGA Tour history. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.